Welcome to the Creative Community Podcast presented by Destination Arte. I'm David.
And I'm Mark.
And for the past 5 years, we have been building a community of creatives who work together to find interesting solutions to telling inspirational stories. And as you may have guessed from the title of the episode that you've clicked on to listen to, that is all coming to an end. Mm-hmm. And we are recording the last episode of the Creative Community Podcast. And just so everybody's clear and understands, the Destination Arte brand will be dormant or non-functioning after this episode. I'll probably pay to keep SoundCloud alive for a couple years just so the podcasts are stored somewhere. And then once I'm sure I have all of the files, I may put them on a free platform somewhere. But you know, everyone who's subscribed to this feed, I know there's some people, Mark, who start at like episode 1 and they find us 5 years in. They're like, I'll start here and I'll listen to all 200 episodes. Why would you do that to yourself? But Mark, tell me a little bit. I have an outline here. Why, in your mind, do you think we started? It was originally the Destination Arte podcast. Now it's the Creative Community Podcast. But why did we start all this?
I remember a conversation that we had. I was in my dorm room. And you were not in a dorm. You were not in a dorm at that point. And we used to call each other. It started by we called each other on Wednesday nights, and we talk about movies. We talk about TV shows, YouTube stuff that we had seen, or just random things. And so we did what all white men do. We said, well, we should have a podcast. And so before I knew it was a trope, to me, it was just what we did. So we were like, let's start a podcast. So we figured it'd be a way to have the conversations that we were having with each other on Wednesday nights about stories, and then share those with other people. So that's what we did. We were both very opinionated people. And so we were like, yeah, let's give our opinions about movies, and things like that. So we decided to basically share the conversations that we were having on Wednesday nights with other people to see if they'd be interested.
Did you listen to podcasts when we started this?
No, I do not think I did. That was something that I got into after, I think. Yeah, I think I got, I really got into it later, but I don't think I was that much into it when we started.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that. Like, I knew what they were, and I knew they were a really cheap way for us to make stuff together. I don't know that I could tell you what podcasts I listened to regularly in 2017.
Right.
Which is such a crazy thought, because now I think both of us would say, why would you ever attempt something like officially that you haven't spent a lot of time consuming and learning about, But yeah, I wanted to ask you that question because I couldn't remember whether or not you did, because you were in college, a sophomore, and I had just moved back to Greenville, South Carolina area. And I think I was out there on the back porch when I said, what if I kind of floated the idea to you? So I guess I would say I probably had listened to a podcast or two and knew what they were, in order for me to at least have the idea that we could just record each other talking. And so we did. Yeah. I think we started this because we liked making things together. And as you said, we are very opinionated people. We were, but we hopefully have learned maybe not to share the opinions without being asked now. I would hope that if we do share our opinions unasked for, it is in a kind and loving way. So I have, there's a deleted episode of this podcast where I reviewed a movie I had just seen. And when I go back and watch it, I'm just shaking my head at how self-righteous I appeared to be and thought that I was. So that's why we started. Can you... I want to talk real quick before we get into the rest of it. There have been several times where we've almost stopped.
Mm-hmm.
Why did we not stop then, I guess, is a great question. Do you remember?
I think we have always done, I felt like throughout the time that we've done the pod together, we've always done the next right thing at the time that it was the time to do it. We've always had big ideas and always had grandiose ideas, but when it comes to the practical day-to-day workings of it, we both have kind of known when it was time to do things and when it wasn't time to do things. So we'll float out ideas like, let's make a movie, but then we're like, at the end of the conversation, it's not time to make the movie. We'll float out big ideas about let's launch merch and things. And then we'll be like, well, at the end of the conversation, we're like, that's not what the time is. And then there were times where we said, let's close down the brand. And then we would come back to the end of the conversation and say, well, that's not time. It's not time to do that. So that's, to me, been the reason why we haven't done it in the past, was it wasn't the next right thing to do.
Yeah, there's a whole line of merch out there that nobody will ever get to buy. I designed it. I had Bethany make the graphics. I put it on the different colored shirts.
Made more recently than you would actually logically expect.
And no one will ever get to buy it. This shirt that I'm wearing, this is one of 6.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it as far as Arete merch goes. There's a piece of wood in my office that my wife bought for me, and there's a stamp, and that, I think there's some stickers. Actually, if you guys see me on the street and stop me, I do have some stickers. Maybe I'll send some with you.
I think I have stickers. Yeah.
I have a couple more.
Oh, okay.
So you could give them away if people wanted them. But yeah, so I guess the real question now is like why we're stopping now. And I wanted to share a little bit about why we're stopping now, and then we'll get into things that we learned, and you can share why we're stopping now too. But why we're stopping now is, well, we've never really obeyed the algorithm, and we've never tried to feed it. We've never tried to defeat it either. We've never worked on our branding as hard as we should have. We've never actually, I feel like we've done some things all the way and other things only halfway with this brand, and we've never actually fully committed, because you were a full-time student, you were a full-time graduate student, you were a full-time teacher. I was full-time working, and my jobs transitioned even during this time. It was always our hobby. Mm-hmm. We've never made a red penny. We are actually in the red by about $1,000 over the past, which for 5 years.
Praise the Lord, yeah. It's only $1,000.
Yeah, but we've never actually made money on the podcast. We've never had sponsors or anything like that. Which is fine. We never, like I said to you before we started recording this, we never actually wrote down what success would be for Destination Arete. So we can now sit here and say we were successful. Yeah. But yeah, we're stopping because we're just at a different point, and it's actually taking more time away from what we want to do and need to do with our lives than it was previously. And it's a great actually place to be in. And I actually do have peace about stopping now. I haven't had peace. We've had several conversations where it's like, should we keep going? Should this be the last episode? Should we record the last episode? And now it's time. Mm-hmm. I can remember the conversation we had a couple months ago where you had the courage to say, should we stop? And then I had a bunch of peace about it, and I said yes. And we shared it with the people closest to us, and they were all excited for us.
And I will say the people closest to us in the past have never been excited for us to stop,
right?
And they've always cautioned us against stopping. Whereas at this point, when we presented it to them, they were like, okay, and before they had always been like, oh, I don't know, and had cautioned us against it. So that was also another green flag for me, bringing it to the people closest to us.
And I want to make sure the listeners understand, I now have a role where podcasting and storytelling is my job. Mm-hmm. And I am salaried. So I don't even clock in or out. I really have quit working, and I've just started living. Mm-hmm. And it's what I do every day. It's what I think about. I'm on Christmas break right now, but I'm still thinking and turning my wheels and getting ready for storytelling in the spring. And Mark, you've had 3 different job offers since we started the podcast that are right in line with your skill set, what you've been learning in school, what you've been learning doing the podcast, and just the way the Lord's been leading your life. And so that's been encouraging for me to see that both of us put a bunch of time and effort into this thing, and it's now kind of run its course, and it has served the purpose that it needed to serve, and it set us both up for what the Lord has next for us. And it has at times been hard, but it's never been the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. Except for now, to continue probably would be the wrong thing to actually have like a brand. And it's weird, Mark. I talked to you about this a little bit, and I wanted you to think about it for this conversation, but I think conventional wisdom now, everybody has a separate brand. Like Russell Wilson wears his own brand when he goes to visit kids in hospitals. He doesn't wear Seahawks gear. Mm-hmm. Cristiano Ronaldo doesn't wear, Real Madrid clothing. He wears CR7 clothing. Mm-hmm. Even like everybody's photography studio and even fine artists, they all have an LLC or a brand that they're running for themselves. And yet here we are saying, we don't want that. We're getting rid of it. We're going to work for larger corporations. We're going to work for other people. And I didn't know if you had a chance to think about that at all.
Yes, I have been thinking about that. And I agree with you that it is a little bit, I guess, countercultural. But to me, when we talk about building a community of people who strive together to produce excellence or whatever, the whole Arete Creative Community podcast conglomerate brand thing all together. For me, none of those objectives have changed in terms of I still want to build communities. I still want to pursue excellence. But what that looks like for me and what the Lord has taught me is what that looks like is not what you think it looks like, Mark. It doesn't look like having an online presence. It looks like being present with the people who are you're closest to. Pursuing excellence doesn't mean stretching yourself so thin that then you cannot actually be good at what the Lord has called you to. So that's the crazy thing is I feel like the brand is going underground to now be a river that feeds, a lot of springs and a lot of things. So when I talk about, why are you guys closing down the brand? It's like, it's because the only way that the brand can succeed in the way that the Lord has kind of laid out in front of us is for the statement of it, the existence of it to go underground and for the principles that we've learned from it to move on, to go on. If you want to build community with people, you may have to give up a little bit of that, your own brand. You may have to sacrifice, you may have to give a little bit more. And there's nothing wrong with having your own brand, but if having your own brand is stretching you so thin that at this point where David and I are at, we feel like the next step for us is to build our skill sets to become so good they can't ignore us, and we can't do that if we're stretched so thin. So that's kind of how I see that idea. And what I've come to the conclusion of with that brand is nothing morally wrong with it. But for this stage where we're at, we're not Ronaldo. We're not Russell Wilson. We need to be just the Seahawks backup, lineman, whatever, where we're just trying to grind it out and get better, get coaching, get things every single day to make us better at what we do, in order that we then can help people,
Yeah, I 100%. And I think that goes well into the next part of what we were going to talk about here is what we learned.
Yeah.
And I've got at least 3 things, and there may be more that come to mind. But I just wanted to share the first thing, which is kind of ironic here in the last episode, but is don't give up. Because I think that the thing that I had to learn, David Burrell personally had to learn, was consistency and to show up every time I had to. Which for me meant every 2 weeks for the last 5 years. And I don't say that to break my arm patting myself on the back, but to say to everybody out there listening, you have no idea how much effort and frustration it was for David Burrell to consistently show up. That is not my nature. I'm very spontaneous and adaptable and go with the flow, and I can crisis manage, but to consistently do something repeatedly over and over and over, once again, not my skill set. And I'm not saying that I'm good at it now. That's not why we're quitting the brand, but it's definitely a skill that I'm now able to put in my tool belt and say, I know what it takes. I know what it will take of me. And if I want to do that, then I can get that thing done, but I also know what I'll be giving up along the way. Mm-hmm. And that it's something I want to share with people is if you have something you want to do, even if it's to own a business that's not in a visual arts field, or if it's to be a visual artist, or if it's to be a parent, or whatever it is, my advice would just be consistently show up and do the little things you have to do and solve each problem as it comes. Because that is how you'll eventually, in 5 years, you'll look back and be like, oh, look at what we did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good. I've definitely seen that in you, and I think can I piggyback off of that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know why I want to add to it, but just adding the phrase, it's gonna take just a little bit longer than you're comfortable with. If you just show up a little bit longer. They talk about in the military, one of the ways that they kind of like trick the guys is when they go on runs, they say, we're going to run for 3 miles. And at the end, when you get to the 2.5 mile mark, your body starts kind of shutting down because it knows it's getting to the end. And then when they get to 3 miles, they run 1 more or 2 more miles, and the guys can't do it. But if they had just said, we're running 5 miles, then the guys would have been ready for it. So like their bodies would have been ready for it. So your mind plays tricks on you where you get to a point where you kind of think you've done enough to succeed, and just hang in there because it's 1 or 2 more laps around that track kind of before you're there. So, and I'm really proud of us for sticking with something for 5 years, because I think that's longer than we've stuck with anything else. So even if it's not, I think that a big win, it's not about a lifetime achievement award. It's just one step for us where, hey, we stuck with something longer for longer than we've ever have. That's what we count that as a success, and we learned a lot. One of the big things I learned is you are not entitled to being good at what you do. It is not your birthright. Nowhere does it say because you are this person. It's not like being anointed king where because you're in the bloodline, you actually have to work for it, and you have to be humble enough to receive feedback and instruction. But that is the most, like, once you realize that you're not entitled to being good at what you do, first of all, it takes all the pressure off, because then you're not trying to, it's not, you being not good at something is no longer a frustration to you because it wasn't yours. It wasn't yours to possess in the first place. So just being willing to work hard, because that was something I think I learned with the with doing launch and doing podcasting. Sitting across the phone or across the mic from a gifted communicator and trying to figure out how to talk, has been really difficult, but you've taught me a lot. You've been very patient with me. And then just as far as the visual aspect of things, just learning how to do different visual things. But it's hard for me because it's very humbling, because I want to be good at what I do. And so, but I had the wrong mentality in the beginning where I was entitled to being good at what I did. And that's where I think a lot of the criticism of media came from, and I'm still working on it. I'm still a very critical person, but also the positive side of that is being conscientious. But thinking about those moments of criticism, and a lot of times those moments of criticism flow out of insecurity of, I need to be better than that, and I need to be good at that. And I'm not, but I can just, in order to make myself better, I will just tear everyone else down so that I can stand on that. So that was something I think I learned overall, like the big wave of, if there was a story arc, of the podcast, it would just be learning that you are not entitled to being good at what you do. And if you do end up being good at what you do, praise the Lord, He's the one that did it. And also, what a blessing, what a gift that is on loan to you that is not yours, to possess.
Yes. The advice I would say to piggyback off of that is just don't make your brand about excellence, because then you have to hold yourself to your own standard that you've set for yourself. And you can pretend that you put the word destination in front of it because you thought like, oh, that'll help us, not be kind of the cart ahead of the horse.
Yeah.
False.
Yeah. And don't avoid, this is just a caution. I'll throw this in as a freebie. If you are crippled by what it is that you are doing or have set out to do, reassess, get some help. Because if what you are attempting to do is crippling you, there is something off in your thinking, that needs to be addressed there. So just ask a friend for help. Say, hey, I feel crippled by this,
Yeah. All right. The second thing I learned that I'm going to talk about today.
Right. I was going to say.
You don't know until you start. And I would say that about everything we tried to do. The webcomic, we tried to make animations about the podcast, like little, like 10-second quotes from the podcast. We tried to animate those. We had different people making us illustrations for a newsletter that never, ever actually went consistently. I talked about being consistent. The podcast was the only thing I was consistent in. Mm-hmm. The newsletter has not been consistent. You made illustrations for us for a time.
Inconsistently.
Yeah. We tried interviews. We tried just having fun with friends. We tried doing doing one topic per episode. We tried. I don't view any of that as failure. I just view it as us not knowing what we wanted to do until we tried it. And I used to think like sometimes you'll find a filmmaker and they'll have won an Oscar, and someone will go back and dig up like their student film or an indie film they made when they were younger, and the films are not good, but you can see that the director had something and that they didn't know what they had until they started making movies. And so we definitely have found things about this brand and about this podcast that we've realized, oh, this is what we either have developed the skill in, or this is what we're naturally good at, or this is what we enjoy doing, or this is what works for the type of content we want to make. And it's been encouraging to me that, you know, you don't always have that freedom in every role that you have, but if you don't have that freedom in that role, then start a podcast on the side, or, you know, I'm putting quotes around podcast. Start something on the side where you can try stuff, because that's always been the thing that when we talked about should we continue the podcast, we'd always say, well, it's just our place to play around and have fun and try stuff. So let's just try something new. Let's try interviewing people. Let's try doing one topic per episode. Let's try having our friends on to do fun episodes. I mean, you just don't know until you start. And we definitely found many things that we were not good at. And we definitely found many things that we could do well if we practiced. And I would hope that at least a couple of those things have been a blessing to someone out there.
Should we talk about repeat your successes?
Oh, yeah.
Everyone, repeat your successes.
Yeah.
Like, David and I didn't. Every time something went well and someone contacted us and said, man, you should keep doing that thing, we were like, we're going to do the exact opposite of that thing.
Yeah. Several of our community members love us enough to interact with us and say, we liked this episode. Or we can look at the numbers and see the episodes that people really liked. Or we can look at the clips on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and see which ones have the most views. Do we ever do that again? No, we didn't. We rarely did we repeat the same thing that people like.
Yeah, so that's something that I feel like I want to take with me, and all these are, but take me with me into my next venture, or, you know, the next thing is just only do the things that you like, so that when one of those things pops off, you're comfortable repeating that thing over and over and over again because you enjoyed doing it the first time. So that's something that I would have to say is just, everyone, repeat your successes.
Yes. All right. The third thing that I'm going to share tonight, well, today, whenever people might be listening to this in the morning, who knows, is the thing that I learned is that, and I'm this is going to sound weird coming from me that I learned this, but because I'm a very social person, I like people. I have lots of people that I consider my friend, even though they may not reciprocate that idea. They might just think of me as someone they know, you know. I would say that others are the key to your success. And by that, I mean, there are so many people that I'm going to forget to thank, but also try to thank later, that were involved in this brand over the course of these 5 years, that had David done it by himself, we would not be having this conversation today. We would have had this conversation 6 months in. Hey guys, we're stopping the podcast. And from people just turning their phone on and listening to one episode, to people who actually invested time and energy into helping us make stuff, others are the key to your success. And I think that can be a challenging concept for someone who maybe isn't others oriented. Like, it was easy for me to ask people for help, but then it was a little bit harder for me to realize how much I needed their help. Like, I like just having people around while I do stuff, but then being able to step aside and let them do it, or let them speak into it, or let them give me what they needed to give me as far as information or knowledge. It was really humbling for me. Just like you said, you're not entitled to anything. I'm not naturally good at all those things. That's why I need those people. And then we couldn't have done it if people weren't listening to it. Like, if we had kept turning SoundCloud on and one person was listening, then we would have stopped a long time ago. But because we kept seeing the numbers go up, we were like, okay, well, someone's listening, so let's just keep making this. But yeah, others, I would say consistency, don't give up. You don't know what'll happen until you start, and then others are the key to your success.
That's good. I'm glad, because we're actually going to end on the same note as far as what we learned. I had saved for last the phrase, isolation is the enemy of excellence. And that is the biggest lesson. I threw it at David a few times to try to get it to be like the tagline. I wanted shirts that said isolation is the enemy of excellence. I think we could have just as easily had shirts that said others are the key to your success, creative community, and that is something I have written on my wall in my studio space. Isolation is the enemy of excellence. And I wanted to go into that just a little bit and talk about that, because I do think it is probably the biggest lesson and the biggest thing I'm taking with me, I think, as we move past.
Yeah, you have said that to me many times before, and I would like to hear how what I shared about others being the key to your success is actually better fleshed out in your mind through this phrase, because it really is. It's something that Mark has in his brain and is going to have in his brain for the rest of his life. And I would love to know how the Creative Community Podcast helped you learn that.
Yeah, it is what David said, that you don't know how much you need others' input. So I'll just list the kind of the three things here. So like number one is your own thoughts are not the end all. Like the way you think, first of all, your thoughts are not you, which is crazy. They will determine kind of the course of your life there, but they are not you. They can be changed. They can be corrected. But I am someone who has the potential to get into his own head a lot. So I need others to speak into those thoughts, and I need to voice those thoughts to other people. So having a place where, with David talking about here's not what I think we should do. Here are my thoughts about the podcast. Are these correct? Just having a place where you can do that. Talking about the brand, talking about those things. It's helped me a lot, even in the interviews, where just if I was to take what I thought, success looked like or whatever at the beginning, and then now that I've gone through the process of interviewing all of these creative people, I feel like every single episode, I just had a little correction to my thinking. Every time there was something added or something removed, that just, either there was an assumption that got nixed, like, oh, I assume that, illustrators, need to do this and this. And then someone would correct that in my thinking, and I would switch that a little bit. And I understand, I want to make a clarification. People might hear isolation is the enemy of excellence and think, oh, I just need to surround myself with a ton of people all the time. I'm not saying solitude is the enemy of excellence. You do need time. David did have to go by himself into a room, and think and work at the podcast a lot, and I had to find a room where it was just me so that I could focus and do things. So you need that time. Solitude, is not to me the same as isolation. Isolation is, I don't need anyone else's input. I don't need any help. And my thoughts are going to just be the thing that gets me across the finish line. And I would just say, be careful. Be careful. Your head is not the place to go for answers. The place to truly go for answers is Scripture, biblical counsel, godly authority, that kind of thing. You want to get those inputs from the right source, and from people who are smarter than you are. People that come on your podcast who have a 30-year career in the field that you want to get into, who are able to speak into your assumptions about what that looks like. So that's kind of what I would say is I've learned that a lot, because I just feel like if you take year one Mark, he is isolated in his thinking. And if you take year 5 Mark, he is much less. That is something I've seen the Lord do, is pull me out of isolation and into his presence and into the presence of other people who can speak into my life. So
that's awesome. It can be really challenging, because you can go both ways. You can either let anything anyone says affect every time anyone says anything about your art, you can let it affect you.
Yes.
Or you can say, no one can say anything about my art except for me, and let that affect you. And you have to find that balance. And I think if you find others out there, if you as a listener are looking at someone's art and you're like, what's wrong here? I know there's something off about what they're making. Then you can probably talk to the artist and find out whether they either let everyone speak in or they let no one speak in, or if they have an overbalance in one area or the other. And I know that is something that we have needed. And it has been, I wanted to share that because this is an interesting time for us to stop the podcast because we actually have people reaching out to us for interviews now. And we actually have publishers reaching out to us to say, could we give you artists to interview? Could we give you authors to interview? We have some people in Holland who are like, could we put your podcast on our list of resources that artists could reach out to for panel discussions and things like that? And we have a listener that sends us like one idea a month. She really wants us to do this type of episode, that type of episode. And we can get an interview with lots of people now because of the work that we've done. And so I have had many thoughts over the last couple months, Mark, where I'm like, are we throwing it all away? Quote unquote. Are we wasting an opportunity? But I really, like I said, have real peace about not doing the brand anymore. And as we'll tell people later, we will still continue to make a podcast together. It just won't be the Destination Arte brand. It'll simply be sharing what we're learning in our own careers out there in the wild. All right, well, I wanted to share some quick stats, and then I wanted to ask you about some of your favorite memories from the last 5 years. So we're up to 550 people on Instagram, 227 people on Facebook. We have 125 YouTube subscribers, which is hilarious because we have like 140 videos. So we have more videos than we have subscribers. SoundCloud is really hard to get stats from. We only have 67 people who follow us on SoundCloud, but I would imagine that other people are subscribed on other apps like Spotify or Apple. So I don't know what that number is, which I'm fine with. We've had over 32,000 listens in the last 5 years. With 2022 being the best year, I think we're going to have around 10,000 listens this year, which is 4,000 more than last year, which once again is like, why are we stopping now? We're riding the wave. And then we've released 165 episodes. Our best listened to episode is episode 124. It's Illustration with Joe Sutphin. And then very close behind it is episode 38, which is our discussion on Patch the Pirate. And then near third, with only like 15 or so fewer listens, is 126, which is Fine Art with TJ Cunningham. So with that,
I love that Joe got the spot. That's great.
With that being said, Mark, give me some of your favorite memories. We'll just go back and forth and share memories. I've got a ton, so maybe I'll go first or whatever. You go ahead.
No, I think my number one memory is just my earliest memory, which is just like being under a bed tent in college with the phone, talking to you on the phone and trying to be quiet because I didn't want to be that annoying roommate that was recording a podcast under their bed tent, but I was. And I think please don't, but if you go back, you'll probably hear like whispery Mark, like talking into the phone, and recording that. So that was one memory from back in the day.
Because for people who don't know, we used to call each other on the phone and then turn GarageBand on our separate computers.
Yep.
And then you would export the file and send me an audio track, and then I would sync them back up.
Yep.
We want to talk about being isolated to the point of insanity. That was me those early years. One of my favorite memories is watching the bracket grow, which I have good news. The bracket will not cease to exist, but you will need to be following David Burrell on Facebook and Instagram if you want to participate in future bracket years, because that was where we got the most interaction anyways.
And it's awesome.
That's where the engagement is, where the
That's
crowd
the one
is.
success we repeated.
Yeah, that was the one. Oh, yeah, that's right. We did repeat the bracket. We're getting ready for year 6.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the bracket's been really fun because it's fun just to get your opinion on it, but then also to have other people giving input. The success, having others help you with the success. Another favorite memory for me was interviewing Bethany in this very room. Because someone told me recently that my life goal, David Burrell's life goal, is to make cool things with the people I love. And interviewing Bethany was that. My brother and I were interviewing our sister, who was an art teacher. And I still am just really glad that we got to do that.
Yeah. One of my favorite interviews, it was one that stands out to me every time I think about it. And I hate to start naming specific interviews because I'm going to forget, I could literally go back to every single episode and tell you something that was a game changer for me that I learned from every single one. But I will say Corey Godby, that one I felt like was a real game changer for us. David and I, we were sitting in the room in this house and we were both sitting very close to each other talking, I think into the same mic or something. And Corey, was it Corey who said, I can't tell you guys apart. I don't know which one is which because we both sounded the same on the phone. And we got that many other times after. But Corey he was our first, I feel like, one where we ever felt like we didn't know this person. We contacted them. They work for people like Disney and the Muppets, which we loved, and they talked to us and gave us this amazing nugget that did he say, I've never told this to anyone before?
Yes. That was the first time.
That was the first time. David and I ran around the house like little kids. You would have thought it was Christmas. Probably everyone else in the house was a little bit scared, but we were just yelling and talking about the interview and saying, and I just remember being so excited together about that. And then that conversation has just stuck with me. And then seeing the idea that Corey proposed in the episode, which was allowing personal work to be the thing that then gets you your professional work, watching that seed grow in David, where I saw David, that seed get planted, and David repeated that to me over and over again. Remember what Corey said? And now to see him making professionally podcasts, vlogs, YouTube video content, and films, that to me has been that thread that I'm like, that was the first point where the interviews really started planting seeds that are now growing. So.
That's great, because calling people on the phone in that back bedroom is one of my memories, because we had like the earbuds that we shared, because we were having people call us on Google Voice, and then we'd press 4 and it would tell them we were recording, and then we would make the episode, and the audio quality is terrible. Yeah, that was fun. Okay, so we're getting into specific interviews. The library interview with Del and Dana Thompson as two brothers, interviewing two brothers. That one was special. It was very stinky and very sweaty. There were 6 full-grown men inside of a very small, tiny, musky, damp underground library in an old church downtown Greenville. But that was just an experience unlike any of the other ones we've had. And I have a ton of respect for the Thompsons. And I've had conversations with them since, and I have even more respect for them. And they've had such an impact and a role in my life that one was just really special.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, give me another memory.
Another memory. I'm just going to go recent, because it was like a dream come true for me, which was just interviewing Andy Gullahorn. It was everything I thought it'd be and more. And it's probably just because these two men are very unlike me, but with Corey and with Andy, they both had a frankness and just a matter-of-factness of speech while just spewing gold. Like it's like, I don't know, it was just amazing, for them to just be so matter-of-fact, but just be giving these nuggets. So I really enjoyed Andy. That was something that David texted me on his birthday and said, we got Andy Gullahorn. And I said, but it's your birthday and this is a gift for me. And he said, I'm giving you a gift on my birthday. I was like, okay.
We interviewed him on my birthday.
Yeah, we interviewed him on your birthday. So that was just a really great, again, you need others to succeed. David self-sacrificing so much to the point that he, on his own birthday, when he could have been going out to eat or doing something else, he interviewed my hero with me over Zoom, was great. And just the vibes, like, that episode is all vibes and it's so fun. So that was a dream come true for me, and I am glad that it did come kind of toward the end. I feel like it was a good like high water mark for me as a personal person, being like, this is someone who I found out about since starting the podcast, who I do not know personally, but who I really respect as a creative person, and now I got to interview them. So I will say Andy was great.
I still went out to eat for my birthday.
Okay.
I just want people to know that I did get to do that. One of my favorite moments, I've got 3 left here, the Little Pilgrim's Progress book giveaway.
Yes.
That was such a huge moment for us personally, that Joe's publisher would be so nice. Moody Press, they're such nice people. I hauled that book to Boston, Massachusetts, because I wasn't going to see Mark for like 6 more months or something crazy. And we opened it together in the oldest home in the city, or Providence or whatever. And, but just like, we knew what was in the box. It wasn't what was in the box that was the exciting part, but it was the fact that there were 5 of them, and they were for us to give away on our own podcast for people, liking and commenting and subscribing or whatever. But that to me was like, we had never set out to be influencers or to be brand ambassadors or whatever it was, but that kindness from someone that we really respected, we loved their artwork, We loved what they were standing for. And then for them to just be like, here's 5 books for free to give to your audience. And I don't know. That was just like, that was really huge. It was really special.
Yeah, that was big. Armand was another big one for me. Armand Serrano, someone that when I was in illustration class, our teacher was like, this guy works for Disney. And I was like, that's cool. And they were like, and he's a Christian. And I was like, that is super cool. So I became a big fan of his. And then it's been fun. It was one of those moments where the Lord transformed and used the thing that I thought was my weakness on the pod, which was I talk about myself too much, but toward the end of that Armand episode, I was able to just tell Armand how much his testimony meant to me from a personal standpoint and share a little bit of a personal story with him. And he took that opportunity and unprompted ran with it to give us his salvation testimony and talk about his influence in the studios. And that quote has been one of my favorite quotes from the podcast is, I hear people say, this is a quote from him. I think it's directed. There's probably wording that's different, but I sometimes hear people say, how do you work at Disney if you're a Christian? And he said, I always say, I don't know how the people who are not Christians work at Disney. He said, I see so many of them that are burnt out, that are frustrated, that have no stability in their life. And he said, it's because of my faith that it allows me to work in that turbulent environment. And just that twist on how we think so fearfully about evangelism and about the world influencing us, and to see Armand so strong and confident in the Holy Spirit, in his faith as a believer, to say, no, it is because I have Jesus Christ inside of me that I can go into enemy territory, and be in those environments. It was really cool.
That was really special. My second to last memory one of my favorites is the Arte event. Mm-hmm. Just getting to see people in person. It really is kind of one of the reasons that we're stopping, is because that word community really requires you to go to where the people are. And it's an opportunity that I get with my current role at work, is I now have the resources to go to where the people in the community that's been provided to me are. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing that you said to me when we were talking about stopping was, if half of our listener base is in Florida and the other half is in Greenville, then let's just spend time personally investing in those communities in person as much as possible, and not so much worry about being online, which is once again counterintuitive to what popular culture and current counsel would probably say. But I think it's the right path for you and me right now. And the Arte community in Florida is very special. I think it's unique for me because I'm not there all year long. So when I go there in April and May for your shows, it is a little tiny taste of celebrity, because there are people who are afraid to talk to me because I am the guy from the podcast, when in my mind, I am not a scary person to talk to, and I would love to talk to all of them all the whole time I'm there. Yes. And so it is I'm not, once again, it sounds like this is all about David, but it's just such a funny thing to me. And I wish I could go more so that it was more comfortable and they had more freedom to just say like, hi, David, instead of, because it really, a podcast, like anyone can be a podcast. If you're listening to this, you can be a podcaster. All it takes is an iMac with GarageBand on it. And actually, it doesn't even take that. You can get Audacity for free. Yeah, but the Arte event in Florida, tons of people came out, more than we expected. Lots of family was there, and we had a chance to just give something to our community and connect with them, let them see the other people that were listening, kind of like put faces to people who also listen to the podcast, which I think is so important. And it was a fun time. It was stressful, but it was fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The in-person stuff was fun. About the Florida thing, the Florida community is funny because I get compliments all the time about the podcast, and poor David does most of the work and he gets none of the feedback. I get all the feedback, and I'm like, oh, you know what? It's nothing. Thank you. That's so nice of you. Praise the Lord. And it's like, but you should really be talking. Like, people come up to me and ask me how to start a podcast. And I'm like, text my brother. Here's his number. Or DM him on Instagram. He actually knows how to do it. I have no clue. I just show up and I just talk about la la la. So it has been a funny. It's one of those one of those Ecclesiastes things where, you know, the rain falls on the just and the unjust, the compliments fall on the people who did none of the work. But yeah,
Great. It's great.
I'm trying to think. I honestly think leaving it at the Arte event is what I could go on and on.
Well, I have one more.
Okay, you do have one more?
Yeah, I have one more.
Let me see here.
You don't have to come up with one more, but I want you to talk about my last one.
You want me to talk about?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think you'll have a lot to say about it.
Okay. Well, I will say, and this is a fun, it's a fun memory for me, but I wish I knew which episode it is. But there is an episode of the podcast where I share a crazy plein air painting story with David. And David was gracious enough to let me tell that story on the podcast. And I do feel like that moment for me is special because I was with my good friend Cameron at the time. You know, I ended up being the best man in his wedding. It's a memory that's with him, and it's sealed in that time when we were in college. And so I do share a plein air painting story way back when, and it is a crazy story. So I will say that was the one time during those early episodes where I felt like I had something like really podcast worthy to share.
We had just read Storyworthy.
Yep.
And so then you were practicing telling a 5-second moment, and you really nailed it with that one. And you could tell that you nailed it listening to it, and you could tell that you knew that you nailed it when you were telling it. And it really is a golden moment on the pod. All right, so my last favorite memory that I'll share today is, it's kind of like, it's a specific point, but it's also a broader idea. So spending New Year's Eve with TJ Cunningham's family a year ago almost. And by that, I mean the fact that the Lord was kind enough to allow our sphere of influences, acquaintances, and even friends now to grow and to also be expandable. And that we actually spent like an important day of the year with one of those people just means the world to me, that the Lord would be so kind. I have artists and creatives numbers in my phone now, and you do too. You have them in their emails, that you get to email artists and send them your work now. I get to text people and be like, I'm in your area, I'd love to have coffee. I had someone DM me yesterday being like, I'm back in town for the holidays, I'd love to meet for coffee. That is such a special thing to me that I did not see going into it. I did not think that would happen. But I don't know if you have ever thought about that, but just the blessing it is to me to see that the Lord has taken our faithfulness, our consistency in just recording something, and then gave you the idea of interviewing people, and then rewarded that with actual people who want to invest in us, and hopefully we've been encouraging and been able to invest back into.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up for two reasons. One, I think it does speak to the broader idea, and maybe it's not the broader idea that you're talking about, but there were moments where we got to go and meet people that we had interviewed in person, and we had never met them before in person, or, you know, it was exciting to go. We went to Massachusetts and met someone. We went to Atlanta, met someone. TJ, we stayed at his house. That was great. Really, really fun time with that. The other thing is, I wanted to mention the TJ episode because that wasn't one of those episodes where we both talked about having dads that worked manual labor and then talking about being creatives. That was a great conversation and a shared kinship there. Spending that time with TJ, like we got to have a Nerf war with his kids. It was so fun. And then we got to sit down with him and his wife. We had a wonderful personal conversation where we talked about things. David used his skills as a communicator to really, we had a great conversation with them. And it was just an amazing time. So that was a really, really big moment for us. Yeah. And man, now I want to talk about more memories. Can I go one more time?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's our podcast.
Are you done with it?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
done.
Okay.
It's our podcast. I just have people to thank, and
Okay.
I want to tell people how they can get more of our content now
Yeah.
that Destination Arte is done.
Yeah. Last memory. Driving to Tampa with Daniel and Patrick to see Joel. That was, for us, the big culmination when we talk about we're building a community of people who work together to find creative solutions to tell inspirational stories. We got to go down with two storytellers, aspiring storytellers, visual communicators, and connect them with someone, and got to sit across the table from them as they got to ask him questions. And he was so gracious. He's a believer, so gracious, so skilled. And And it was incredible. We both got in the car afterwards and we're like, that was what it was. That was what this was all about.
That was success.
That was success. Yeah. Even if we never I think you even said that. I think you said at the time, we didn't know what success looked like for us, but now we know that was it. And so having done that once for someone, is a real big.
And praise the Lord that we've actually done that multiple times through no fault of our own. We've heard this story before, but a young lady reached out to an artist and asked to intern with him, went and traveled Yosemite taking wildlife pictures. Okay. Because she heard from you how she got a signed copy of the textbook and the original painting that's on
from
the
another
cover,
artist,
from a different artist, the same young girl.
Yeah.
And then we had someone recently that reached out to an artist that was on our podcast and got an internship. We had another person, the young man we took with us to meet Joel. He is now getting feedback from Joel on his work. And we want to say to anyone out there listening, like, you don't need us. You don't need David and Mark to get you in the door. You work hard. You be willing and humble to listen to others, and you reach out for help from other people, and you will be able to make connections and have these opportunities for mentorship and for growth in your skill or in your business or whatever it is you're trying to do. And that's what we want you to take away from the Destination Arte story is these are two kids from the middle of the country who knew one artist when they started. And that artist happened to live in the same city as Mark did growing up. And since then, the Lord has really blessed and enriched our lives. And we have to give him the praise and the thanks for that.
Absolutely, because that is something that we did. I think some people are like, oh man, like that's so cool that you did that, whatever. What I always try to encourage people who talk to me about the success of the pod or about connections, whatever, is the Lord, I guarantee you, has given you something that is a strength that you can use, that you can leverage. Leverage what you have rather than focusing on what everyone else has that you don't have. Leverage what you have. I was talking with a young man and he was trying to figure out how to get an internship. And he was like, I don't have any family that are artists. And I was like, do you have any family that is, where does your family live? And he's like, well, I've got this family here, this family here, this family here. No real art towns, And I was like, okay. I said, he goes, well, but then my grandpa, he's an evangelist. And I was like, your grandpa's an evangelist? I was like, that means he knows everyone. And he goes, yeah, he does. He's always after me to work for this one guy that was, and I was like, there we go. And he goes, oh, so I was like, contact your grandpa. I guarantee you could figure out something. So even if it feels like if you're trying to get into a creative field and maybe you're a conservative, Christian kid or whatever, that's like, yeah, all my family's in the ministry. I guarantee you the Lord provides for his servants. He, if he has given you this thing that he wants you to do, he'll provide for it. So what I would say in that is leverage the strengths. So the strengths that we had was we knew one artist. We took a shot. I interviewed him in a cafe. We knew one person who was getting a doctorate. I took a shot, interviewed her in a different cafe. We just kind of took our chances with the opportunities that we had in front of us. So that is something that I would say is just use the things that you do have access to.
All right, Mark, I have some people to thank. I'll thank a couple and then I'll throw it back to you. I'd like to thank Andy for giving me a Scarlett Focusrite, which is an interface that lets my microphone connect to my computer and improves the audio quality of my voice. And that was a big purchase that I hadn't made, and he gave it to me, which was a huge blessing. And on that note, Andre gave me a couple microphones and these XLR cables that we're using right here. Just had them and wasn't using them and sent them to me, and would have been, $250 total. Which, like I said, we never made money on this podcast, but it was still just a huge blessing that they cared enough about what I was doing to give to me.
Yeah. I would like to thank Adam Clegg. He has always been a wonderful encouragement and a big fan of mine and yours. Completely unmerited. I don't know why he's a big fan of ours, but he's a very big fan of ours. And that's always been such an encouragement because he's so good at what he does. That's been encouragement. He has obviously made a huge investment in my life, if you know anything about my personal story. But as far as the podcast goes, he has always been someone that has been a fan. Like ever since he found out that we were making the pod, he's listened. He texts us when he listens.
Yeah.
He listens while he paints, and he treats it like we're doing a great job, which is like, wow, okay, all right. It's always just a big boost. So words of affirmation from him have always been a big help to me. And then also he was someone that we asked, can we interview you in those early days? And he said yes. And that was such a big deal. I remember interviewing him in a cafe, and he was so excited and he was so honored to have been asked. Again, so humble. So I just want to thank Adam Clegg.
I would like to thank Bethany for doing a bunch of graphic design for us over the last couple years. We kind of brought her in when I don't remember what you said, but you were like, what if we asked Bethany to do this? I'm sure you were just looking for a way to lighten your load.
Well, yeah, I was looking for a way to make the graphic design actually look good, because I knew she would make it look good in an instant. I knew she would do what I couldn't. And it was in that process of learning, like, you don't have to do everything yourself.
Yes.
But I was very, very grateful for Bethany when she came on, because I knew that she was just going to do a great job. And she did, So.
Which I wanted to point out that both of the theme songs for this podcast, version 1 and version 2, I made those. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the one you heard at the beginning of this episode is the first one that was made by someone who's not me. And it was just a remix of what I had made. And then a lot of the graphic design that you guys saw was Mark. He designed the logos, all of the logos we've ever had, and then put together a lot of the graphic work. And then Bethany just kind of made it better, like you said. I'd like to also thank Amy. She took over scheduling and sending Zoom links for me at one point, which was kind of that first taste of me being like, oh, someone else can someone else could speak into this and like make our lives easier and make the product better. And so Amy was I know she probably doesn't think it was a big help, but it really was a huge help.
Yes. Yeah. I remember that I wasn't even doing anything with schedule. Well, I think I was supposed to do things with scheduling. And then David told me about Amy and that she was going to help. And I was like, that sounds amazing. And then I still fumbled the bag every single time that I was supposed to do something with scheduling to get it to her. And she scheduled so many things last minute for me. So thank you so much to Amy. I wanted to thank a guy named Mr. Nate Drushinen. He has always, again, been a big fan of ours. He's been on the pod twice. He is our resident. We always called him our resident art supply expert. He just would come on. Man, knows so much about so many different topics. He's so skilled. And then just with those, he came on and gave us some great art supply stuff. But he's always been so nice. He promotes the podcast episodes to people at school. I was taking a course in school, and we had to turn in reading cards or listen to content, and one of the examples that he listed was our podcast as an example of what students could listen to. And he has just always been a promoter of us and a big fan of us, so thank you to him. It means a lot to me as someone who is his student, and now kind of both his student and working alongside him, just to have someone be a balcony friend, just cheerleading you on, has been so helpful. And then I do want to thank Camden. Camden has been a quiet, as he is in all things, quiet supporter of the podcast. Where I remember one time he was talking to me about something, and I was like, well, the pod, I guess, if you ever listen. And he goes, you think I don't listen? I listen to every episode. Like, he was mad, because he had listened faithfully, and I was like, you consume something that I make? He's like, yes, you are my friend. Of course I listen to the podcast. And that was something that really blew me away and really meant a lot to me, was, wow, you listen, and I'm not, it's no pressure on him, but I was like, that really meant a lot to me to know that he was listening. And I've gone to him at different points. He was the first person that I told that we weren't going to continue making the pod, because I knew that was something I could tell him and something that we were talking about in our own creative journeys. So I wanted to thank him for just being by my side throughout college. And then also he's just always been by the side of the podcast, walking along. And he's been on episodes, I think he was on an episode, and he's just been a quiet supporter and such a big friend and help to me along the way.
Would be remiss if I didn't thank Zach Jordan. Mm-hmm. I was talking out loud about how I needed to find an editor for the podcast, and he wanted to learn how to use a certain editing software. So he volunteered to do it for me. And he has been editing the last 4 or 5 months. and has been that second taste of me being like, oh, I could be a creative director, and other people could spend hours in the editing room. But he's been just incredible as far as like the time he's been willing to put into it, because he's working full time and then doing for us on the side. So I would also like to thank Mom and Dad.
I would too. Just so you know, I never mentioned any of my family, but if David hadn't mentioned them, I would have. Just throwing that out there. I love my family.
But Mom and Dad listen to the podcast, and then they text us about it, and then they are excited for us when we have successes. And Mom put up a little sign for us when we interviewed our 20th artist, which was John Pomeroy. And they've just always been the best at encouraging us to pursue things that they know will be beneficial for us in the long run, even if they don't know what the outcome is right now.
Yeah.
And that is just invaluable in our lives.
Yeah. Last person I would like to thank is Tabitha. Tabitha is David's wife, and she has been so kind to loan David to me. As you know, like it's like loan a friend. You know, like she has shared him with me in terms of making the pod and taking up lots of evenings, taking up lots of time. And so that has just meant so much to me over the years to be able to continue to be friends with my brother and be able to continue to make things together, tell stories together, and have fun. It is a privilege that I have to have an older brother who is interested in being my friend, not just my older brother. And so when he got married, that did not change, because his wife was gracious and said, yeah, go and do things that make you fulfilled, that make you happy, that add value to you as a person and that you enjoy. So I just want to thank her so much. She has been just our biggest fan, our number one cheerleader, and so helpful as far as just supporting us at every step of the way.
Yeah, Tabitha was next on my list as well. She has liked every Facebook post.
Yes.
She and I are the only two people that have liked every Facebook post that we've ever posted. And then I've talked about this on a different podcast episode previously, but just making that space and that time in a marriage for me to have those long hours in the office. And I would hope that I never prioritize the podcast above my family, but I also know that she is really happy for me where I am now in my life as far as my career and my job. And I wouldn't be there if she hadn't been so willing to let me do that for so many years in the office. And I cannot thank her enough. So I have one more person to thank, but before I do that, if you are currently subscribed to the Destination Arete newsletter, you will, in a month or two, get the first episode of the David and Mark Show. If you're not currently subscribed, but you want to be, destinationarete@gmail.com will not be deleted. You can email us, and then eventually we'll have more information about how to subscribe to the David and Mark Show, which will be on all podcast platforms that we can get them on through. I think Substack is how we're going to do this. But Mark and I will be releasing episodes once a month, and it will be more of like director's commentary on what we're learning creatively. There may be interviews. We don't know. We don't know. But there won't be a brand. We won't be selling merch. And we will just be making podcast episodes like we wanted to from the beginning.
Yes.
But we'll actually be doing it the way we should have been.
We're going to literally try to keep it our playground. We are going to try. And one resolution, I don't know, something that I have for this new brand is to keep definitive statements out of it, because that has been such a tricky thing for me, where I make statements and they sound like they are statements, and it's like, no, they don't need to be definitive statements. Like, I kept trying to craft this opening for the pod, and it changed over the years, and it's like, don't do that. Don't try to just keep it a sandbox. Keep it the David and Mark Show. Keep it that. So we're going to try with all our might, and it is going to be probably the hardest thing we've ever done, to keep it a sandbox, to keep it a playground. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, the last person I would like to thank for all of their work and time and energy on the Destination Arete podcast is Mark.
Oh.
And thank you for being willing to learn with me. It's been fun. And like we said, we're not done, but it is a chapter that's ending. It's a book that's closing. So it is, I'm a nostalgic old fool, so it's a little bittersweet. I showed Mark the highlight video that you all can watch on YouTube, and he gave me a big hug because it's a 4-minute video full of memories, and it really brought back for me just like everything that we kind of been through. And it's really only like the last 2.5 years worth of memories, because we didn't really start videoing things until 2020. But there's an Andy Gullahorn song called I Will, and that's the song that makes me think of Mark, because he's just willing to put his shoulder down, and I come up with some crazy idea and he's like, okay, let's try it. Let's see what happens. You won't know till you start. And so, yeah. Anything else you want to say, Mark?
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you to David. I didn't realize we were thanking each other, so I didn't bring anything prepared. This will be extemporaneous. No, that's not a word. Extemporaneous. So, but I said to David something personally off the record that I will not say here, because I do believe it is reserved just for a conversation between me and him about just the levels of faithfulness that David has exhibited, because it has been so impressive to see. It's been inspiring to see, and I've really enjoyed getting to go on this journey with him, to watch him show up. There was a time where we were releasing an episode every week. We released 52 episodes one year, covering 3 topics per episode. I don't know what we were doing. Probably not doing our schoolwork. I wasn't doing my schoolwork, so it's really, really incredible to see, and just get to hang out. I am very privileged when I talk to other people just to find out about the relationships that they have with their siblings. And I am just so blessed. I thank the Lord all the time for the relationship that the Lord has given me with my older brother, who is not just my older brother, but 8 years older than me. And yet he has always included me, always made me feel like I was a peer with him, in the appropriate context. And so it's just been amazing to get to continue to make stuff with him. And I'm so glad that the Lord provided an avenue for us to stay close while we were in different places during that time.
Yeah. Well, normally this would be where we'd say we'll see you in 2 weeks, but we're going to let Andy sing to you for a minute, and then there's a little tiny Easter egg at the very end of this episode that not even Mark knows about, that he'll have to listen to. But I'm gonna leave something there for you all. So thank you everyone who has joined us on the Destination Arte journey, because Mark, the one person we didn't thank is the listener, because they have been the person we've been doing our best to serve, even though we were serving ourselves most of the time. And we hope that in some small way, the Creative Community Podcast has been a blessing to you. And we look forward to, if any of you ever see us, please come up to us and say you listen to the podcast. I met someone the other day who had just discovered us, and I was like, boy, you're in for a rough treat in about 40 weeks when you hear the last episode. But yeah, it's been fun, and we are really grateful. And so after Andy is done singing here, we're going to use copyrighted music. We don't care. We're not making money off this anyways. And then the Easter egg. And then, if you're a subscriber, then we'll see you in a couple months. And if not, better get on it.
Nothing, all you hear is silence. Feels like you're alone, drifting off of the map. But many souls have gone down this road you're on. At least I have. Sometimes people think it's better feeding you an answer for what you can't understand. But if you want someone who will just cry with you, I can. Some say there's nothing they're ashamed of. They cover up the tracks from the hell where they've been. But if you're looking for something broken, I am. all gonna take a last breath. That's not the only sad death we are meant to feel. If you need a friend to do some dying with you, I will.
I thought it would be fitting for the last thing for anyone to hear from the Creative Community Podcast, presented by Destination Arete, to be the last paragraph in Watership Down. It reads as follows. A few minutes later, there was not a rabbit to be seen on the down. The sun sank below Ladle Hill, and the autumn stars began to shine in the darkening east. Perseus and the Pleiades, Cassiopeia, faint Pisces, and the great square of Pegasus. The wind freshened, and soon myriads of dry beech leaves were filling the ditches and hollows and blowing in gusts across the dark miles of open grass. Underground, the story continued.